Ladies, what's going on? How you guys doing?
Good.
Amazing.
Of course you are, Miss Sonia, Miss Dark and Lovely, fun and all of that. So, guys, I just want to welcome everyone who knows this show. This is WKIM. We keep it moving with Marsha Jews. Today, I am going to be her co-host. She has an extraordinary show lined up for you guys in honor of Women's History Month. This month, she wanted to honor the new women in media that are making waves and moves and breaking down barriers and that are taking the leadership role in what media looks like. They are narrating their own stories. They are keeping it moving while still honoring the people that came before them, that paved it before them. So I am honored to bring to you, well, for now, two of my favorite media personalities, Miss Icon, Miss Diva, Miss Thing, Miss Sonia Hudson Payne. Woo woo.
Hi, Meredith. Hi, Mia. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I really am.
No, we're so excited to have you. I'm super excited to have you. Mia, hello. You, my young one, you young whippersnapper, the new one, you kid on the block, but not so new. You are getting ready to pave it forward for the next generation, the Gen Zs. You are an extraordinary young woman that I happened to meet because of great people wanting to connect us and we being fans of each other in the wedding space. So it is an honor, privilege to bring you into this space.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. So what I want to do is I want to keep this conversation very light, and then get into the meat and the core of what we're really talking about. And it is about keeping it moving, but while looking back on how media has had an impact on us as a society and women. Sonia, you have been doing this now. I just want to get people to understand who you are and what you've been doing for the past couple of years. Please give us your full name, your title, and the name of your show.
Sure. So my name is Sonia Hudson Payne, and I am the founder and CEO of Sonia On Air, LLC. And it is a media platform, podcast, syndicated radio show where I interview celebrities to unpack their pivotal moments and their milestones.
In a positive way too. That's one thing that you left out, which is super key, because you meet people where they are, but you give them accolades and celebrate who they are and what they have contributed in their respected field.
Yeah.
That's what I really enjoy about every time you put on a show. That first of all, you got the best personality. You make everyone feel welcomed. So I'm super excited to see that you have expanded your platform.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some of the platforms that you're currently syndicated on?
Sure. I'm syndicated on the radio dial in Augusta, Georgia, and in Texas, alongside some of the most influential people to me, D.L. Hughley, who is a comedian, political commentator, and also Cheryl Underwood from CBS's The Talk, and also J. Anthony Brown, who is a world-renowned comedian, and he can be seen on BET's Assisted Living. So that's on the radio side. The podcasting side, you can catch it on just about every streaming platform: YouTube, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora Music, Amazon Music, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, you name it, Sonia On Air is there.
Oh my God, you sure you don't have any more places that you're on?
Soon.
Soon come, right? Soon come. I love it. I get excited every time I hear of all the wonderful work that you continue to do and how you continue not to allow things, challenges to be dead ends for you.
Right.
It may be roadblocks for the moment, but you've always found a way to navigate your way through the system of media, which is, you know, we have to be really honest. It's male dominated, white male dominated. And so it kind of makes it hard. And then, you know, investors, backers, that is continuously becoming a problem, even for major white figures. You know, they still, every money is something that is hard for any business. And so let's just think about as a Black woman running this space. So can you tell us what brought you into media? What made you fall in love with the storytelling? Because you are an author.
I fell in love with entertainment because as a kid, I was just enamored by television. Just growing up in an inner city, sometimes what you see is very limited. So the world just became my personal atlas. So the television, in other words, became my personal atlas. And I just wanted to explore. I was so enamored by the individuals that I saw on television and listening to their music and watching their films and wearing their beauty products. And I said, well, we see them on television. Why can't I have a conversation with them? So I created a platform that made it accessible for women like me, a woman of color who grew up in an inner city, to reach people who just seemed unreachable. Right. And it worked. And when you talked about the challenges, mother, I live for them. When you come from the inner city, it's like you were born with challenges. And in order to escape your community, you have to be very innovative. You have to have such a fortitude. So I was born with the strength to circumvent whatever challenges and obstacles came my way. So I welcome them.
Boxing gloves and all, you know. But you're not limited to just being, because you're a young woman from Brooklyn.
Yes.
But you are a citizen of the world. You are a world traveler, and you are heavy into your community, meaning education, and you are a huge advocate for children and young people and reinforcing them that they belong in this space and they deserve it. Yes. Why is that so important to you, for you and to you, that you remain there as a figure for these young people?
Because once again, growing up in an inner city community, I wanted kids who grew up just like me to see me as themselves. Fortunately, I had amazing teachers, right, elementary school, that introduced me to the arts, and then ushered in, I was auditioning for specialized schools where I was classically trained in dance and musical theater and drama and also singing me, 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 me. So
I love it.
I owed the world, I owed the universe some form of reciprocity. I had to give back what was given to me. So that explains my lane in education. I've been in education for over 20 years. Now I work with just about every New York City public and charter high school, making sure that students have enrichment opportunities. I got outside of the classroom because I said, okay, we understand the math and the English and the science, but are we producing citizens that can contribute to today's workforce and create legacies? So this is what my work in education does, and this is also what my work in the media does. I just want people to know that you can do it too, and I'm a prime example.
You really are. But, you know, you mentioned that you went to college. Can you tell us what school you went to?
Sure. I went to SUNY College at Old Westbury for my undergraduate degree. And for my graduate degree, I went to the College of Mount St. Vincent.
So why was that such an important path for you as a young Black woman? Why was that so important?
What, going to college?
Yes.
First generation.
Ooh, boom.
I had to start somewhere. And once again, I was built and born with the fortitude. So it started with me. So when they passed me the baton, I had to finish the race so that my daughter and her daughter and her daughter's daughter can also finish the race too.
Okay. Pass that crown, you know. The next on the throne, next on the throne. And I do have to say that I'm super excited that you're not selfish, that you're sharing your daughter with me, because I think Bria is absolutely phenomenal. She's a gorgeous young woman. And when we talk and when I meet with her, she is just this silent storm waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Well, so do you feel that she impacted you? Would things have been different for you had you not have had her?
Yes, she changed my life. She really changed my life. Once I found out that I was pregnant, it kind of magnified my purpose. And it said, you need to make sure that you have it together, because now that you are about to have a child, this is your legacy. What are you going to do, Sonia? So I had to show up and I had to show out and make sure that I produced a child that was a major contributor to this world. And I had to surround her with the right people like yourself, because, you know, iron sharpens iron.
Absolutely. And you and I talk a lot, you know, about family and the importance of family and our children and the impact that our children have had. You have not allowed, you know, because sometimes, not everybody, so this is not a blanket statement. Women, for so long, we've been put in this box where, oh, you're supposed to be a wife, a mother, and you stay home. Okay, you could have a job, but you still got to come home, cook, clean, and that's it. And we tend to lose our identity. You know, you, number one, are not turned off to love and relationship. I see that in you, and God knows the young ones, I have to say it, Miss Cougar, they can't get enough of you.
I know, honey. I know.
They literally think, I'm like, wait, boy, go sit down. And it's just so beautiful for me, you know, being a woman that runs a bridal magazine. Love, marriage, and relationship is really, really important to me. I believe in the structure of the family, and I believe in legacy building, and you can build a legacy for yourself. But if you don't pass it on, it's not really a legacy if you have no one to pass it on. And it doesn't mean that the child has to be yours that came from your womb, but it is, who are you going to pass the legacy on to? And that is a word that I know means a lot to you. Like, legacy means a whole lot to you, you know? So can you give a couple of pointers that you would give to women that are thinking of getting into the media space? What are some pointers that you think they should know about?
The first one is know yourself. You have to really know yourself in and out, because in this media space, media executives think that they know everything. They think that they are the ones who color the world. And darling, I'm the crayon. So know yourself.
Right.
That way people can't steer you in the wrong direction. Two, persist. You will be told no a million times, but it is that one strong yes that will get you in the door. And because you came in the door knowing yourself,
right,
you always remain in the room, and also build another room so that you can open doors.
Ooh.
The third thing I would say is do your homework. Your craft. If you aren't studying your craft or doing something in your craft on a daily basis for, I would say, a minimum of 4 hours, a minimum, what are you doing? What are you really doing?
Right.
But thank you for the hobby. The next thing would be mindful of the company that you keep. Some people only want to be around you for the glory and not because of your story.
Ooh.
So be mindful of the company that you keep.
Right.
Be a gatekeeper with your brand.
So and that's the other thing that you're really big on, developing oneself as a brand and identifying yourself as a brand from the things you post, from what you say, who you associate yourself. I know you're an advocate for that, you know, because you're very protective with your surrounding as well as your daughter and your family, you know. So I'm super excited about that. Please don't leave. I want to jump because you said something that was really interesting that led me into Mia. So Mia, please give us your full name and your occupations.
Hold on, you want my government name? Because that was pretty long. But hello, everybody. My name is Mia Adriana Lopez. I am 20 years old. I am a junior in college. I am a founder and CEO of Create TV, which is essentially what I call a TV for the people. It is where, because a lot of things happening with COVID and a lot of people with Facebook changing into metaverse and Instagram being Instagram, always changing their algorithms. A lot of people, especially in the young generation like myself, their works aren't being broadcasted the same as they used to be. And a lot of Gen Z and millennials closer to our age had their work just shoved to the side. You remember how in Gilded Age, how Miss Russell was snubbed aside because she was part of the new New York, and the old New York wouldn't let her in. So it was kind of the exact same thing. That's what Gen Z is all about. So I wanted to create TV because people who submit their work or like post their work on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, that intellectual property is not 100% theirs. Like there's always some sort of percentage that they're going to take out of it, no matter how much money that you make off of it. And I hated that concept. So I basically created Create TV for the sole purpose of people having 100% ownership of their content. Anyone from any age can join. It doesn't matter if they're 9 years old creating art pieces. They'll be able to host their own art gallery onto the network. Someone who is a photographer and wants to showcase some of the past works that they've done. It can be literally any type of media that that person wants to, whether it be a TV show, a movie, a mini series, or a documentary. They have full creative control.
When did you decide that, I know you decided that you had to do it, but when did you decide that you were the one to do it?
Well, it honestly was a natural progression because I am an event producer. I produce events all the time, whether it be for photo shoots, whether it be for, and I'm also part of the Tennessee Entertainment Commission. So anything to do with media, entertainment, that's just what I do. And I was so tired of seeing Gen Z, especially Gen Z like me, African American, Latina. There's not a lot of our faces in media. And I wanted to be the person that would help open that door and help them break through that chain of cycle.
Wow, that's a big responsibility. Wow, that's huge, and I'm a woman of a certain age and I'm overwhelmed sometimes that I can't even get out of bed, and then, I've been in the media space for 30 years. And Sonia, what is it, 10, 15 years for you? Oh, can't hear you.
Over 10 years.
You see? And so hearing this young person say, we're going to take it on, it's like, wait, what? What? It's so why are you not afraid of it? That's what I want to know. Why aren't you afraid of it?
I mean, it was just mainly the way that I was brought up with my parents, because they were always so, if you want something, don't stop until you get it. Even if there's going to be some adversity that you're going to have to go through, some obstacles that you're going to have to jump over. People are going to tell you no, and you can't be afraid to, okay, well, I can hop over this way and I'll still be able to get it.
Right. Wow, that's major. So you are a event producer, wedding planner.
Yes.
You also own Creative TV, which is your platform that's going to be out soon. But there's something else. So you faced tragedies. One major one is you lost your father at a very young age, and you and your dad were very close. And you guys promised that you would start a business together.
Mm-hmm.
Did you start the business with your dad?
Yes, when we first started, because since we always wanted to start a business together, we didn't even know what business it was going to be. We just knew we wanted to open one up one day. And he would be like, okay, I'll be the construction side, you be the business side. And he would always bring out, because he used to be an aeronautical engineer and he used to study at Embry-Riddle. So he was super, super smart with numbers, anything math related. So he would always give me the textbooks. He said, here, this is what I learned. You're going to learn this with me. Learn anything about numbers, calculations, all of it. So when it was finally time for us to say, okay, I think I got the idea. It was around my 15th birthday when we were having my quinceañera, and he had passed away about a week or so before the actual quinceañera. And to honor that promise, I decided to create Ivory and Oak, because my family would always joke that because he was always the strong one in the family, he was the oak tree. He was always the hard go-getter, and I was the ivory. I was the one that would help smooth things over with him. I was the one that was graceful and help, negotiate things. So that's where the name came from.
Wow, I'm like stunned. I'm amazed. So your father died, and so now, do you have brothers, sisters?
No, only child.
Who's your partner in business?
Incredible. My mother, my beautiful, beautiful African queen of a mother. She is amazing. I would not have done this without her. When I first started the business back when I was about turning 16, I was going to school and she would help me with my clients. And I told her one day, I was like, hey, I can't keep calling my clients when I have recess or when I have lunch break and be like, okay, yeah, I'll get right to you. So I told her, I was like, hey, if you trust me, let me test out of school and I can, we can move on with this, because we were in a really, really bad place during the time that he had passed away. So I went on ahead. I tested out of school. The first time I passed my SAT score, the requirement to enroll for the University of Memphis. And the month after I had passed, I enrolled into college. And that's where I am now.
How old were you? Please tell us how old you were.
It was about 17, 18, right before I turned 18.
Okay, at 17, 18, I think I was still skipping rope.
It's okay. That's okay. Look where you are now, a successful businesswoman still.
It's like, oh my God, wait, naps? I'm businesses and I'm skipping rope and taking naps.
Well, my family had always been business oriented, even with my grandmother and my grandparents. They always had businesses popping up. My mom, she helped start businesses with other people. She was the one that helped, Morgan Freeman get into voice acting. She brought the idea to him. So she has done a lot, and I trusted her wholeheartedly to help me start with this. And now, about 6 years later, here we are.
Wow. Okay, but what you deleted from this storytelling is you woke your mother up in the middle of the night and told her to quit her job.
Yes.
Enough money to take care. Yes, Sonia.
I did. It's like every single night, it's just like she'll have her own alarm clock. When she starts hearing my feet coming down the stairs, she's like, "Oh, okay. What is this?" I said, so I have a crazy idea. And she said, "Oh God, what?" I said, "I want you to quit your job." And she sat up in her bed. She said, "Huh?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "If you trust me, I will help. I want you to retire, and I want you to help me with this." And she has not, because she used to work at the IRS, and I retired her. So, yep.
I'm going back to my nap because I can't anymore.
Me too.
Nap, So when people say young people are lazy, I don't know if they've ever met Mia or
right.
these two together. are going to wear me out. Literally, you know. So I find that absolutely fascinating that you and your mother are very close, you know.
Yes.
And and I can vouch. So everybody, I want you to know I can vouch for what she's saying. I have called her up, and all of a sudden you're like, hold on one second, and then it's her mother on the phone, and her, you know, she's like, wait, what is it? You know, so her mother's not even up yet. She's like, wait, I don't even. Who is this I'm talking to?
You know.
So it's extraordinary, and I love the power meetings that we have because the power meetings are inspiring, and you're very thorough. You and your mother are very thorough. So she is actually the director of operations of well, one of the titles for your corporations, you know.
Yes.
And she's pretty extraordinary as a woman, as a mother.
Most definitely.
Yeah, so I get excited just hearing both your relationship with your mother and how you value her. And I get excited about Sonia being a mother and wanting the same for her daughter. So I hope you see, like, as mothers, how much we want. And then you are exactly what we want our children to always be, that, you know, for us. Because we always want the next generation to do so much better than what we have. And we're willing to do the digging work. We're willing to lay down the foundation. We just want you guys to, you know, take the cup or take the baton and keep going with it. Because it doesn't stop with us. And we hope it keeps going with you. And then you keep moving that forward, you know. So before I, you know, get too far into it, because I think we have a couple of minutes, and then I'm hoping Luisa comes on, let you guys go. Everybody, I really need you guys to follow these women. And, you know, I honestly have to say this, you know, it might be a little bit harsh, but it's not going to be as harsh as Marsha. You know, these ladies, everybody, can you tell everybody, starting with you, Sonia, give your website, your social media handles, and you should be off the hook right now, because we're not coming here just to talk, because we could talk with each other over a glass of wine somewhere or at somebody's private beach. We're here because we honestly want to share our experiences, because we want to be that reflection for people. So can you tell people your handles?
Sure. You can catch all of my content on my website, www.soniaonair.net. Also follow me on Instagram. Sonia_on_air. That's the same thing on Twitter, same thing on Facebook, Snapchat. I'm on there too, and TikTok. I'm TikTok every day. Lord Jesus. That's my website, and those are my social media handles. Make sure you also go to my YouTube channel, Sonia on Air, and subscribe. Share it with your friends, family. You can share it with your enemies too, because
and your haters, right?
Yeah, they need to glow up too. Okay.
So I am a huge. Just one thing that I love is T-Pain said, "I want to thank my haters." That's my favorite thing. Yes. So I want to thank my haters. So I'm like so excited about that. Thank you for doing that. Your YouTube is absolutely phenomenal. So thank you for that information. So everybody, please blow her up. Go follow her, subscribe. It is very important. Why is it important that we follow each other? Because numbers matter. Because if we don't support each other, it's not enough to say, oh yeah, Black power, oh, women power, women history. No, it should be a year-round thing. It is really important that we do that. So please follow Miss Sonia Hudson Payne. Sonia on Air, Sanya. That's how she spells her name.
And I also add, Meredith, that it's also important that, you know, you follow us across our social media platforms, because social media is a beast within itself. It's something that we can't control, the algorithms. Once you start sharing, once you start posting, once you start remixing, you know, our content, it increases our algorithm and allows other people to see our content. So please engage.
Yes, I would. I love that. So Mia, can you also give us your social media handles and, where can people find you?
Yes, of course. So you can find me on both Instagram and Facebook, ivory.oak. Just look for the brown tree. If you want to know a little bit more about CreaTV, you can go to creatvnetwork.com. Below you can have a little inquiry if you want to sign up.
Okay. Can you spell Create TV, please, for them, just in case?
Yes, of course. CREATV.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I don't know if you mentioned it because you're trying to hold out.
Yes.
You own wine.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I own my own wine label. Yes.
And wait, don't play yourself. Right, I know, Sonia. This is as strong as it's going to be right now. Water. So don't try to play yourself and leave us stranded here. The wine. You are the youngest currently woman
yes.
color that
Yes.
owns your own wine label in the US that we're aware of. So we're going to claim that for now. You're not even 21 yet.
I'm not.
Bingo.
Yep. It has been trademarked.
Trademark. Yeah. And so this is not new. So you're going to have to come on again, and Marsha's going to have that conversation with you because Marsha and I and Sonia are wine connoisseur. We will get on a plane, go to somebody's vineyard, and get us some wine in a minute, so I definitely back.
Yes, of course. Come to California with us. We can try it there.
Yeah. This is amazing. This is what I love to see and what I love to hear. This is what makes me full. This is what makes me want to do what I do each and every single day. It is so important that we create platforms like this so that, because we are true testaments of what, Black excellence looks like in women of color. So my hat goes off to both of you as well for creating lanes and leading this narrative beautifully and magnificently.
Oh, you're amazing. And this is why I love you so much. You're always celebrating each other. And let me tell you, you had me in Carnegie Hall, the Metropolitan Opera, every year. And I thought I would cat's meow. I was like, wait, my girlfriend sends me to the Met to live.
We have to be in those spaces. It's important.
And you never felt uncomfortable about that.
No.
You never felt like, oh no, we don't deserve to be here. And in fact, you are so phenomenal that you would literally be saying, you're looking for inner city kids to give them that experience. You have called on me and my team, hey, can you do hair and makeup and get these kids for their graduation pictures and so on? You give back to your community. This is not a one-time, oh yeah, cute. No, you live by what you say.
That's my purpose. Yeah. Even today, I was walking down the hallway in high school, and a teacher, she said that she wasn't feeling well. I didn't know her. And I just walked up to her and I said, well, would you like a cup of hot coffee? I mean, a cup of hot tea. I'll make it for you.
Right.
She was like, huh? This is what we're supposed to do. I don't want to be next to anyone and see you struggling because
exactly.
Like, what am I there for? Evidently, I'm next to you because I'm supposed to help you.
Wow. That's powerful. And so my last statement for you is Miss Mia Lopez. You're 20 years old. You've mentored young people. I want to keep reemphasizing. You're 20 years old. You've mentored young people. You've taken young people to Paris.
I have.
All expenses paid.
Yes, ma'am.
Foundation.
Yes, ma'am. So my organization is called Free to Be. It is an organization focused on helping underserved youth and communities. Recently, like Ms. Meredith said, that I took a couple of young entrepreneurs to Paris with me back in November of last year. Some of them hadn't even ridden on a plane before. Some of them haven't even left their own community that they have lived in their entire life. And it is to help them get into public spaces to where whatever career or whatever profession they want to be in, whether it be a politician, whether it be someone who's a photographer, someone who's a chef, I make sure that I put them in places, the best of the best, where they'll be taking classes, they'll be taking seminars, and they'll be taking workshops. So they'll have the experience of what it is like to be in the profession that they wish to be in. So by the time that they come back, when they're ready to start their own businesses, they have the experience and know what it is, and we will help them through and through.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, bravo.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to, when I wake up from my nap, I will be like you.
Made me tired, child.
Yes. And we can celebrate with both my bottles of wine.
Yes, exactly. We're so
Mhm.
excited about that. So I want to thank you, ladies. Do you guys have any last minute things to say to our We Keep It Moving crowd?
Be great on purpose.
Mhm. I love that.
To be on a t-shirt. Or
I'm
staples that's
actually
gonna be
designing
folded.
apparel, so that might be it. Who knows?
Oh, can you tell people about that? You have an apparel.
Oh
You-
yeah, I have Sonya on Air apparel. Go to all of my social media pages, my website, and you can get a direct link to my apparel. I'm about to design a new spring and summer collection, which will be launching very soon. So be on the lookout for Sonya on Air Empower Apparel, because everything is empowering. I want people to manifest greatness.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And so Mia, where are people going to be able to buy your wines?
So they can find the wine on 1666wines.com. From there, we're having a pre-launch, and it is direct to consumer. So by the time it officially launches, it will ship from the winery to wherever they're at currently.
Perfect. Thank you so much, ladies. I am honored and to have you guys as associates, friends, fellow women in media in that meetup. And that was always our goal, you know, Sonya, you, myself, and Marsha, to create a platform where we could bring in other women that are in media and be supportive of each other. So thank you guys. And I want to wish you all the best. And I will see you all very soon. So what are we going to do? Keep it moving.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
So, guys, there you have it. These are two extraordinary women. And I'm hoping that I can turn this over to the boss lady, Miss Marsha Jews. And she's pretty extraordinary. And as you guys know, Miss Marsha Jews continually keeps it moving by bringing you guys the latest of all sorts of news, from entertainment, politics, what's happening in your community, travel, culture, you name it. I think we have one more guest, Miss Luisa Diaz, who is the former Miss Venezuela, New York, and she is the author of the amazing book. I hope she made it on. I know she was really having a little bit of technical problems like we always do. Sexy is Timeless. I hope you guys can see it. So I'm waiting to see if we can get her on. If not, Marsha Jews is going to be on right away. So give us a minute and we'll make sure that things are keeping to move.
Hey, hi. Trying to get the sound. I don't know where the sound is. Can you hear me?
I'm on.
Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hey. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Oh, I don't know what I was doing. We need to have tech support. We'll get to that one day. Right. How you doing? That was a great segment.
Thank you. And I'm honored that you feel that I'm worthy of being a co-host. You're
I know, because you were my ride or die for real. So I don't even know what all that. Well, that's really good. I don't know where Luisa is. She got the link, so
Okay.
hopefully she'll show up.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that is very important here is that we were able to have a conversation with a 20-year-old woman who has her own wines, her own event company,
Right.
and her own media organization. And so let's talk about when and why it's so important. Women in media meet up.
Yeah. So for us, like you and I have talked a lot. We talk about the challenges we face as a woman in the media space. It's more than just writing blogs, and no disrespect to bloggers and anything
Right.
else. I think that's just a title that just came on board because they probably didn't go to journalism school. But journalism school perfects your skills. It gives you a different way of doing it. It gives you the formalities of going to telling a story or reporting on a story. And it was designed so that you can stick to the fact and not make past judgment. But I was listening to Miss Tamron Hall talk about we always come, with our own judgment to any story. It's just important now to block it when you're telling the story while you're interviewing people. So, but it's more than just reporting news and information and saying what's the hottest thing, what's the lipstick, or what war is happening, who's XYZ. In order for a network to stay in business, to stay on the air, they need to operate as a business. In order for them to be a business, they need to generate revenue, stream, and everything else. So for us as women of color, we don't always have access to those things. And that tends to be a major problem, So even if you win the trust of your viewers and you build your following, how do you convince the organizations, the brands to invest in you and that your audience could possibly be their consumer? So that was the reason why we created WIM, was to help us as women in media that have smaller platform, that were not general population or publicly known to the masses, that we were just as relevant. Because I tell people all the time, you may not know who World Bride magazine is, but I know I'm in the room with the Vogues, the Glamours, the Brides, the Knots, and all these other. You may not have done your research and have looked me up, but it doesn't mean that I am not valuable or I don't have the access that you think, So it is, and that can be it's disparaging. It can be disparaging. It can be disappointing for us, especially when you believe in what you have and the product that you have. And so for me, it was so important that I didn't feel alone in it, because then it takes you down this road of depression. And so when I met Sonia and I saw what she was doing, I was super excited. I always knew you, and you were generous enough to say, oh my God, can you be my producer? And it's because I had MLM represent. I was working with Faith Evans. I was working with Kim Hampton, Justin Davis. It was easy to get them on your syndicated show that was globally seen, and in fact, we did a whole show based on artists from the UAE. You've interviewed people from Nigeria, from Dubai, from, all over the world, Colombia.
It's because of you. Yeah, I don't know why you can't remember, because you're the one that made it happen.
But that's just who we are. We meet, we respect each other, and then we were able to keep it moving and move it forward. And to me, that was what the whole goal for WIM was. And so now we add this next layer to it. We have an Afro-Latina that's part of the group, Mia Lopez, 20 years old. And
she's bad. She is bad.
Hush your
Fire.
mouth.
Fire.
Bad what?
Fire.
Your mouth.
Fire.
It's like 20 years old. Like me and Sonia were saying, we were taking naps at 17. And she's starting another business, we're joking about this. Sonia and I
But it's real.
really hard to get to where we're at. And we knew we had to jump hurdles. We jumped the hurdles no matter what they threw, the grenades that they had, the hidden things. We did it. And so when we meet a young woman at 20 that says she wants to be in our space and she admires us, you think we're not going to bring her in? It's like, get your shoes, let's go. Get your purse, let's go. You can sleep on the plane, let's go. And I'm able to do that because people like you do that for me. People like Sonia do that for me. People like Mickey Taylor, I can call and say, she's like, "Hi, darling, what do you need?" It's that love for people that respect and are excited for you and they want to see you win. That's why WKIM was so important, for me.
Well, but see, I think that what happens too often, our egos get in the way and we don't take advantage of what's in our circle, be it our inner circle or outer circle or extreme circle. There are still people available to you,
Right.
but our egos get so caught. We don't want to say that we need help. We don't want to say that we would love to be able to learn from you. It's real difficult for some people to be able to do that. And too often, this is 2022, and the way that media was working 20 years ago, 22 years ago, it looks nothing like what it looks like right now.
No.
We're now on a platform that you can see everybody you want to see from all over the world. You can get the big account where you can have 50 people on here if you wanted to. This is now our TV.
Right.
This show is really a television. It should be
Right.
called WKIM TV. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to change that right now. TV. That's it. I love that. It's so brilliant. But the reality is that that's what we're seeing. We have electronic newsletters that go out now. People aren't taking the paper anymore. They're getting it online. Everything is online, and the internet is just clogged with everything. And so that means that all of the things that you can dream of, you can do. You can be as creative as you want to. We're sitting here having a conversation. You're in New York. They're in California. Sonia's in New York.
Yep,
I
she's
mean,
in New York now.
And I'm sorry.
She's in New York now. She was in the Bahamas the other day.
Yes, well, she didn't. She had to go. She said, "I need a break. It's enough." Miss Sonia. Between you and Sonia, I just, you wait. You just wait till this pandemic's over. I'm gonna be back out anyway. But when we look at it, it's really interesting how so many people are now doing the blogs. They're doing the. You can now have your radio show on all of these platforms. You can take Sonia. I don't even know how many platforms she's on. She's on like 6 or 7. I mean, really. And so, right, it's a big number. And so, if we're talking about media and you want to be creative, it's literally, you can go to a library, you can go online, you can print it down and see what you're supposed to do. It's available for us. I think the thing for me is that I didn't really realize, it was just like one day I had this epiphany while I was doing a Zoom call and looking at all these people who were coming in to deal with something with the United Negro something. And I was like, wait a minute. That's a lot of people sitting here on this one screen. Now, the little boxes were little boxes, but what they had probably 100 and something people on that screen. So you mean to say that I could do what I'm doing right now, and 400 people can be on the same platform with me on some of these platforms that are available, that have the capacity. And so we have to be creative, and people of color have always taken the leadership role in media. We have the Black media. We have Black newspapers, Black radio station. Dorothy Brunson was the first Black woman to own a radio station. She was right here in Baltimore. Now look at Kathy Hughes. And they too are, well, Dorothy's deceased now, but Kathy Hughes, Radio One, they're changing on how they're able to deliver their information all types of ways. Black Enterprise is doing the same thing. They're having meetings, they're doing interviews, they're doing everything, and it's happening online. So I'm just grateful that you came up with this idea, and it sounded great, and I'm happy that we could do it. I think one of the challenges that I see now, or not even a challenge, that I'd like to see, and you started talking about that earlier, about having young people involved and getting young people to do things, getting them active, getting them acclimated to doing and seeing themselves there. This young woman is sitting there and she's talking about, she has her own, and she said, not only do I have my own wine, yes, I have it, and it's trademarked, so she wanted you to know, she was like, yeah, and I got my little TM, so y'all can't even try to take it. You can sit here and play with it, me, if you want to.
What people have to realize, don't underestimate young people, because let me tell you, when we and I'm not gonna, my generation, did some damage too, but the generations before, I think our parents played it polite, and we were taught to, don't push waves, wait your turn, it's coming. These young people, you don't want to give it to me, watch me take it. You don't want to give them an opportunity, they created it. Like, look at Facebook. Before everybody thought it was, Facebook, nothing's gonna happen. Then when they did Twitter, they was like, oh my, we already have Facebook, why would they need Twitter? Then they came with Instagram, then it's TikTok and all of this stuff.
LinkedIn. I know.
Everything. Young people, the next generation is no longer waiting for you to give them an opportunity. They're not begging you.
No.
They're going to create their own platform. Like, take a look at Miss Issa Rae. She got discovered because she had a YouTube series that she came, and now she's one of the hottest women in Hollywood doing shows with Netflix and everything else. So the power of the internet has brought so many people together. It brings news. Like, would we have ever known what was happening in Egypt with the Arab Spring had it not been somebody that put it on they captured it on their cell phone and told what was going on? And look at what's happening now in Russia. They're literally taking things, not in Ukraine, rather, they're literally using their phones to let their families know, people around the world know what's going on. So we cannot underestimate the internet, the social media. It is getting it to the consumers immediately. Yes, you should filter what you're seeing. You need to know context in what you're seeing to make sure that it's factual, that they didn't come in the middle of it or in the end of it, and then they're making a synopsis of the whole thing. You still have to do your due diligence. But I think younger people has a huge distrust from major business and corporations because it's become too commercialized. They decided they're going to do it themselves, So for that, I say bravo to the young people like Mia, who says, oh, you don't want me to be a part of it? Oh, you're going to control my algorithm? Oh, you want to take my content that I created? Watch me create my own. Hands down, I think it's genius,
Oh, I know.
I'm super excited about what young people are doing. And it's inspiring me. It's telling me to get on my game. And it gets so, I feel honored when they tell me, oh my God, you inspired me to do XYZ. And I'm like, wait, what? We don't think we have an impact, but yet we in reality,
we do. We do.
So I think that's it for my time. I don't know what happened to Miss Luisa.
I don't know.
Yeah, so maybe after you interview your next guest, if she's on, we can get her through.
Do you want to call her and just see, because I think my my next guest is in the green room or wherever they are.
So you can do your next guest, and then I will talk to your producer, Mr. Donnie, and see what's going on. So it
Okay.
was an honor to be your co-host today.
Yes, and thank you for being yourself and always jumping in and handling your business like you always do. And I'm so appreciative.
Because what is it that we do? We mind our own
Our
business.
own business. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right.
So thank
Meredith
you so much.
Leon.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Meredith Leon McCormick, World Bride Magazine and MLM represents. She's also my everything. So all right, darling. We will talk soon. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye.
Oh boy. So thank you all for being with us. We're really excited. We have our next guest is really amazing. Sorry, we had a few little hiccups earlier, but it is what it is. You keep it moving. So Tim Todd is the author of A Great Moral and Social Force, History of Black Banks. And it is through recent historic films that explore the events leading up to the 1921 massacre in Tulsa's Greenwood district. Millions of Americans learned for the first time about this chapter in the nation's history and about once thriving Black-owned communities, businesses, and banks. And I don't want to take too much more time, but I'll tell you, this is a very important book. And I have my little dividers all in here taking a ton of notes. So why don't we get Mr. Todd in here and then we can explore with him all of the things that he's been doing. Tim Todd, please join us. And so.
All right. Hey,
how are you?
good to see you. I was a little
Welcome.
bit scrambling with my technology here, but I think we're doing okay.
Well, I was sitting there looking. I said, well, does he come in or something? Because we've changed our tech people, so we're working on that. But welcome. This. Oh, first of all, it took me forever to get to the bank business, right? Because the setup is so deep. There's such a history about in the 1800s, right? That
Right.
we're dealing. You got to deal with all of the things that occurred from slavery to people being in the United States and functioning and to get to the bank. You've taken
Right.
us through the whole journey. So why don't you share with us how you got there and why, first of all, why was this book so important for you to do?
Well, there's several reasons why this book is important, and we wanted to spotlight with this some really vibrant communities and show the role that Black banks played in really anchoring and being the foundation for those communities. And this is a history that a lot of people don't know. I don't like to say it was a forgotten history, but it was kind of a history that was scattered out. There was a piece here and a piece there. And through my work at the Federal Reserve, I had generally done research on the history of the Federal Reserve and some of its political issues, and more broadly on the history of banking and financial crisis. And through the course of that work, I would sometimes, be reading an old newspaper, an old report, and it would mention one of these banks that are in the book. And I was really interested. I just wanted to know more about them. And so I went online and thought, well, I'll just order a book and I'll read it and we'll go on. And what I found is there wasn't really anything out there that put these histories out in sort of a what we hope is a very broadly accessible format. You don't have to be an economist to read this book. And we felt it was important to not just focus on the banks, but to place them within their times and sort of make sure people understood the environment that these banks came into and then sort of what they created going forward. So that's what really drove me to it. And then obviously the Fed has a concern about people being able to borrow money on appropriate terms and how you think about economic growth and economic opportunity and all those issues. So when I went to my bosses and said, hey, I think this is an interesting history, they were very supportive of that.
I just think it's fascinating that the Federal Reserve, because you think of it just as like they know where everybody's doing everything in the banking industry. It's like the place for all of that data to be housed, and they're
Right.
in different locations around the country, if I'm correct, right? Because I know
Right.
people who've been on the reserve board. So one of the things I think that was really fascinating, that one, the Federal Reserve thought that this was important enough to tell this big story, because this is a big story. This is not a
Yes.
little story. And I'd really highly recommend that you all get this book. It's called A Great Moral and Social Force. And it is a history of Black banks, but it's also a history of Black banks and the banking industry, but it's also about Black people who were slaves and Native Americans who were also slaves and slave owners. So there's a whole nother story within the story of the story that you have woven this thing. I was like, well, wait a minute. And so you see, I have my little pink versus my yellow,
Well,
because it had different things that I had to, I was like, wait, what is this?
it's interesting in going into this history, because there are a lot of things that people think they know.
Mhm.
And so it felt like we had to spend a significant amount of time sort of explaining, when how would an enslaved individual have money, for example?
Right.
How would they be able to gather those types of resources? Well, we need to explain that. And then as we talk about Oklahoma, the relationship between Black Americans and the Native American populations and how they ended up there and sort of how all that works. So it felt like we were, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but it felt like it was important. And to talk about things like redlining and some of the other things that went on. And people think they know that story, but trying to get into that and really explain, here's what it meant and here's how it was countered and all that. So we thought that would be valuable.
I think it was very valuable. I need to do this. From a modern day perspective, the reasoning behind the tribal membership provision, as opposed to simply granting the former slaves freedom, may not be apparent. The decision reflected the belief that some enslaved people owned by Native Americans may have had very little in common with slaves held on Confederate plantations. Instead, their lifestyle reflected Native American culture in innumerable ways, including language. Many did not speak English, food, clothing, and community structure to differentiate between the slaves and the Indians. The term, which I've heard before, freedman, was applied to the tribal name. Didn't know that.
Right.
For example, a former Creek slave became a Creek freedman.
Yes.
This is some powerful stuff, because I've heard of the freedman, right? But
Right.
I've not heard it in this context at all.
Right. There's a huge history there, and I was very fortunate. There's a professor and author named Barbara Krauthammer, and her name is in the book, and we mention her work, and she's done a lot of research in that area, because tribal relationships were very different, and so how slaves were treated in some and how they were treated in others could differ significantly. And then, as you talked about, they didn't have exposure in many cases to what we would call, I guess, a European culture. And so when they are emancipated, they don't have even the ability to communicate in the same language as people in established states did at that time. So it was a very unique situation.
Speaking of states, the movement I always thought was something different, but they were doing a lot out in Oklahoma. They were doing a lot out in the Kansas and out in those plains, the areas where we thought, because I'm from South Bend, Indiana, and you're Chicago, we thought back then, we were thinking that whole migration from the Mississippi and that whole region, that we were coming up through into Chicago. And then we were making some other moves into the Detroit area. Right. But now we're seeing this Northwestern kind of movement that we didn't talk about in South Bend, Indiana growing up, or in materials that I read, right?
Right. So I grew up in a small town in Kansas. So I was familiar with a town called Nicodemus, Kansas, growing up, which was in
What?
western Kansas.
Yes.
And so it was considered a black community. It had some white population there, but there was sort of a migration before the Great Migration of individuals and families wanting to start somewhere new.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a lot of wide open land in the American plains. And so they went and cast their fortunes there. There were at one point about 50 different all black communities established in Oklahoma. And you had some in Kansas and Nebraska and even on the plains of Colorado. To a lesser degree. But this is a chapter of history people aren't really familiar with. Obviously, as you talked about Tulsa, people are very familiar or have become more familiar recently, certainly with Tulsa. But we focus on a town called Boley, Oklahoma, which wasn't far from Tulsa. And it was literally built from the ground up. They laid out the streets, opened a bank, and set about building a community.
And so the depth in which you go into, why was all of this important to you? Because it was, as I'm reading this, I'm reading more about a historical journey of two different ethnicities, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're supposed to be learning about banks, and to get to the bank, you got to really understand. This is my thinking of your thought process. You really have to understand what it took to even get there, to even talk about having a bank.
Right. And we want people to really appreciate, pretty much everybody who's featured in the book is an inspirational individual. And so we really want people to appreciate that and understand just how much they have overcome in many cases just to get to the point where they can create a bank, and to recognize sort of, their motivations, the world around them, in many cases, the significant risk that they would face just getting to where they could open a bank. And then in many of their cases, in fact, after they open the bank, some of the risks that they face. So we just felt this was important. We had published a book prior to this called Let Us Put Our Money Together that focused very tightly on the first 3 black banks. And a lot of people told us with that book, they really liked how we presented the banks within a broader history. I felt that was important. And I felt there was an important responsibility here to educate people that let's not just focus on the banks. Let's make sure people understand these institutions within the fabric of American history and can really appreciate that.
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting, because it was important to you, one of the things that you said is that, hold on, let me find this. It was a thriving community. Okay, here it is. His mother was raised there, and his grandmother was a McCormick, a prominent family of local community leaders. Although Boley of the mid-1970s was past its prime, West convinced his editors it was worthy of a Post story. Is that the Washington Post?
Washington Post, yeah, they did a big feature on the community and on its history. And so Boley had been well known at its height. It was featured in all sorts of national publications. It was really almost an example of what could be accomplished as a community came together. Now, what ended up happening is it's in a largely agricultural area. The agriculture markets turn. We have World War I, and then that migration you were talking about into Chicago, where you've got better paying jobs. Highways are built, makes it easier to get to those places. One of the challenges they had in Boley, and they knew at the time, was they needed to find stable year-round employment for young people. Mm-hmm. They had some cotton gins that only worked seasonally, and they knew if they couldn't get a major manufacturer in there, it was going to be problematic. And they ended up not being able to get that employment stabilized there before the world changed and people headed further north.
So in looking at this movement with these communities and how these communities settled, many of these communities were also integrated in environments that weren't necessarily as extreme in some of the southern states, but they had their own extreme situations here. How do you make that move? How did they make that move to these places unknown, right? They didn't know where they were going. And how did they navigate that experience?
So yeah, so this is obviously a tall order. Some of these jobs and communities boldly would advertise in publications across the South, and then people would welcome them and help them get established. And then, of course, as the job market erupted in Chicago, again, word spread through the Black press, papers like the Chicago Defender, which were broadly pretty much the national Black newspaper that people saw and learned about these opportunities. And so there was a lot of communication. There were agents that would travel into the South and sort of help people get them started, get them on often on the train, and get them on their way.
But I think what's also interesting, because we get these clips of information, right? There's not a encyclopedia on slavery to today, right? When you look at people having to make these adjustments and they migrated to these communities, right? There's always some kind of movement. And how did they actually come to a place where they could feel comfortable building their own banks? They were going to banks, and some of those banks weren't giving them what they needed.
Right.
And can you talk about the quest to understand banking and to be part of a banking community and what was happening back at that time?
Sure. You had people, and I think an example that comes to mind here is Jesse Binga on the south side of Chicago, who was a very visible individual who was a landlord and leased property to people. And so in a case like Binga's, he comes into banking through a way that others did, is when you are the landlord, there's a good chance you're the wealthiest person that your tenant knows. And so at some point, either the rent is going to have to be late for some reason, or those folks are going to have to borrow money for some reason. And so they're going to go to the landlord. And so that's sort of how Binga begins to bring people in, gets his bank established. And then he and others start just very basically telling people, a dollar a week, a nickel a week, come in, and they start encouraging people, often working through the faith community, working through churches. Local fraternal organizations. You have a number of fraternal organizations during this period. Those groups help support the banks and bring people in, teach them the importance and the value of financial stability and building that banking relationship. You would even see articles in the newspaper. Anthony Overton, who ran one of the banks in Chicago, was writing a newspaper column regularly about the value of banking and having a savings account and the importance of that was well known in the community. So it happened in all sorts of ways, but it wasn't it was often a slow process. Obviously, when these people got to Chicago, they generally did not have a lot of wealth to start from.
Mm-hmm. So when we think about, we know that it's part of the reserve, and we also know that there were a lot of challenges. Can you talk about what was happening? And since you mentioned Illinois, can we talk about the aftermath of the 1919 violence in the Illinois Governor Frank Loudon established the nonpartisan interracial Chicago Commission on Race Relations back in 1919?
Yeah, so you had a young man who's 17 years old who drowned in Lake Michigan, and it was a racial incident, and there were varying reports that he had. It was a segregated beach, and it was understood which side everyone, I guess, was supposed to be on. And he had drifted across this imaginary line, and some rocks were thrown at him, knocked him off the flotation or the little raft he was on, and he drowned. And so that tragedy erupts into violence, and then that violence continues not just on the beach, spills over to the community, and goes on for days and days. And sort of before talking about the commission that really went in and was for the first time really went in and sort of deeply looked at issues of race in Chicago and what was going on. Bankers played a key role because the community on the south side was shut off in many ways. Individuals didn't feel safe leaving the community, and so that meant there were limited supplies there if you wanted food for your family even. And so it's Jesse Binga, the banker, who is established well enough within both the Black and white communities, who's able to do some things and be able to bring shipments of food in and help people during this time of this violence. And so after this period, then there's an investigation into Chicago's structure and what had happened as far as race. The racial tension in Chicago rose as the war came to an conclusion, and you had soldiers coming home from the front looking for jobs. You had an increasing Black population that had moved there, and so it was really a fight for employment that you saw there. And so the racial violence continued to escalate, where maybe before it had been on a smaller scale. It's really after this World War I period where it really begins to escalate, and then you see the eruption there in 1919. And one of several cases like that happened across the United States, I would.
Yeah, and Southside Chicago was known to, and I had family. I'm from South Bend, Indiana, and with family that lived in the South Side of Chicago. And well, when you sit down and you look at all of those back, sure, this was 1919, but we were still having problems in the 50s and the 60s.
Right.
In Chicago, and that's still there, right? But also when we look at those that transition and people having to function, and we also get into redlining,
right?
And part of that South Side is carved out. So in many banking institutions, not just Chicago, but since we're talking about Chicago,
right.
You can't do anything there because it's redlined.
Right.
You can't buy a house. You can't get a mortgage. You can't do a lot of things. Can you talk about what all that really meant in some of those communities that were a little bit more extreme? There's some who are far more extreme than others.
Right. And so, so what redlining was the government was changing the way mortgages were handled in the United States. And so they relied on local real estate agents to basically determine what kind of risk could the government insure a mortgage in this neighborhood. And so one of the criteria was ethnic composition of the neighborhood. So often if Black individuals lived in that neighborhood, then those mortgages were deemed to be of high risk. And so that meant the government wasn't going to insure them. So that effectively cut off credit in many of those neighborhoods. I would note also the a large neighborhood of immigrants would also be a reason where you could get redlined. But in these communities, it was very hard to be able to borrow money. And so that means not only can you not borrow to buy a house, you can't borrow to fix up the house that you are living in. So if the roof goes bad, you just kind of have to deal with it as far as you're not going to be able to borrow money. You're not going to have access to that credit.
So I know firsthand that is a fact.
Really?
Yes. I worked as an assistant branch manager for First Bank and Trust in South Bend, Indiana. And they redlined, they had the big maps and they had the lines. Now in South Bend, you have the east side, west side, south side, north side, and southeast side. And there were pockets, as I'm sure there's same other than just in South Side Chicago, but there are other pockets of Black communities all over the country, these little pockets. And they said, okay, Marsha, you can't, the red line literally shows you the streets, and there's literally a red line that says you can't get a loan here at all, right? Well, in South Bend, there was maybe 180,000 people that lived in South Bend-ish, right? I mean, that's been 100 years ago since I've been there. But in those spaces, they have Black enclaves. And in those Black enclaves, because the numbers were so small of Black people, you knew everybody who lived everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You
knew everybody on the south side, southeast side. You knew their mama, the grandma, the cousins. You knew everybody. Sure. You knew all the pastors. You knew everybody. And so people that my parents knew who needed to have their roof repaired, who needed to have the car broke down. They needed to get some money to get a car. They needed to get a window changed because somebody broke the window throwing a ball or something. They needed, the furnace went up. And there were all these things. And so my manager, branch manager, said on more than one occasion, because I was in his face all the time, I said, these people need a loan. And it was nothing. I mean, it was really no real money.
Right.
I mean, for real. Because we're talking about this, the mid 70s, right? So what are you saying? I went ahead and gave them those loans. And they were vigilant about paying their bills. They paid their bills. I got fired for giving those people those loans because they lived in those redlined areas. And so he said, you knew that this is not what we wanted you to do. And you were given a directive. You were given a directive. You were given a directive. It's like it happened yesterday.
Wow.
And I said, I don't understand the directive when I know everybody personally that's coming in here to get this loan. They're college educated, or they have a profession. They're working or doing something with some sort of organization, and they were solid citizens. They went to the churches that I knew. I knew them. And they said, I violated the directive. And they fired me for doing that.
Wow. Because redlining just takes you completely. I mean, it doesn't matter what the numbers say or your character or anything.
This is where Black people live over here on the east side. So if you look at, here it is. You got the west side, the east side, you got the southeast side, you got the southwest side, well, actually it was the south side, and then the north side over there. There weren't very many Black people up there. And so I can tell you every street that the Black people lived on in South Bend, Indiana back then. Every street. And they said, you cannot. So this was the first thing I saw when I thought about when I read this, that this is real.
Yes.
This is real. We were in a little office where we had the little conference room, and you sit down there and they had a whole big thing, and they literally marked that thing up. And this is where you can. And I sat there and I was like, okay, so Aunt Helen lives over there. My Aunt Virg lives on the north side. Oh, Beverly Dixon's brother lives over here. Beverly's brother lives over here. I'm looking at it. First Bank and Trust. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And they fired me. That's okay, because I did give those loans.
Well, you helped a lot of people.
They did get the stuff fixed. But when we think about that, let's go back, because that's just one little community. South Bend, maybe back then 160,000 people at that time, maybe. Right? So it wasn't like you're in New York where you got 1 million people stacked on top of one another.
No, you can go out. It's interesting because you can go online and you can find some of the old redlining maps. And I think people would be stunned at the size of the communities that were affected by this. I mean, there are literally some small towns where they did these maps and they were put out, and it was not, if you have a case like yours where you're familiar with the community and maybe you have some family who's lived there a couple generations, looking at those maps today can really give you something to think about as you think about your community today and how it has evolved over time and where it hasn't maybe developed versus where it has developed, and sort of all those things as you can sort of think through that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so I just turned 70 a couple of weeks ago, and that was 1970 when I graduated from high school, right? So in that period, what has really changed across the country, right? What has really changed across this country? Because even though they may not have that map in the basement,
right,
it's still understood that zip code now may be the new marker that they're using.
Well, and one of the things that, if you look at a community, so I'm in Kansas City, and I can, call up that old redlining map and look at that, and then I can look at Kansas City today, and in some of those neighborhoods today, the ones closer to the real heart of the city, there's not a bank in those neighborhoods. We know pretty much anywhere you go in America, what we call an alternative financial services provider. So pawn shop, title loan, all those, check cashing services, those are located very often in those same communities.
Yep.
Where they continue to have a large minority population. We know that. And, one of the reasons we wrote the book is because the number of Black banks in the United States has been declining.
Yes.
And we know that Black banks, more often than not, are doing business with a Black customer base. And when they go away, that territory is very often going to fall to the payday lender if it hasn't already got, some stiff competition down the street from those folks.
Let's go to
that's
the
where people
wait.
get in trouble.
Stop right there. I'm going to put a pin right here. Please talk about the payday lender. Please expand upon that, please.
Yeah. So in the United States, people, the way that we sort of look at them in the banking system, you can be unbanked, so you are completely outside of the banking system, or you can be underbanked. And underbanked usually is going to mean that you or your family has a checking account, but you probably don't have a savings account, and you probably don't borrow money through a bank. And so and even sometimes if you're fully banked, you can fall victim to a payday lender. And so what that's going to be is you are going to go and borrow money from them for a very high rate of interest. So you might need to borrow, $1,000 to fix your roof or buy a new refrigerator, or you've got to have some dental work done or whatever. And you're going to have to pay that back sometimes within a couple of weeks, or you're going to get $200 of interest. And that interest is going to continue to compound. Depending where you are, as far as some states have cracked down on these types of places a little more than others. But obviously, it's important for people to have a banking relationship where you're through a mainstream financial institution to be able to not just save money for those kinds of emergencies, but to have that relationship built up so you can borrow money. And often when I speak to groups, I get kind of caught up talking about borrowing for a house or, starting your education or whatever, but it's really the things like, my basement flooded during the rainstorm, and now I got to redo part of my house, or I got to get a sump pump fixed, or whatever. And those things like you were talking about, not huge amounts of money necessarily, sort of in the big picture, but money to get you through some kind of emergency. And the problem is, when people start borrowing from those, you can see them sort of begin on a slippery slope, because that then continues. If you can't repay that very quickly, you're going to start having some serious problems, and it's going to get out of control very, very fast.
And that's interest that's being tacked onto it.
Interest, right? So
can you talk about what that interest? Yeah, can you talk about that interest and how it escalates in these?
Well, right. So if you're getting $200 on $1,000 and you don't get it paid off for maybe a month or two, suddenly you're going to owe $2,000, and then that's going to turn into suddenly $3,000 much quicker than it turned into two, and then it's going to be 6 and 10, and so it's going to pick up speed the longer it's out there, and it's going to be hard to get out from under that, and it's really debilitating to people, and then it also hurts your credit history. So even as you try to get out of that, it's going to be harder for you to get into a mainstream institution to be able to borrow money from them, or be able to maybe get a credit card or something even like that, because you're destroying your credit history with what's going on through that title loan or that payday lender or that type of business. And there's a real problem. I think that people, a lot of these businesses, their businesses are very savvy, and they build relationships with the community, and they are engaged, and people go in, and in some cases it's like, going into McDonald's, here's the board of what it costs to do these things. And I think people maybe feel a little intimidated. If you feel a little intimidated going to a bank, you might feel more comfortable going into a payday lender just because of the way they sort of present things to you. And it can really be damaging to people. And like I said, some states have begun to crack down on them. More certainly need to. People need to really, you can do a lot of damage to yourself in a very short amount of time.
Okay, so, we say payday lender, but that's not a normal term that I would understand typically, right?
Right.
Give us a couple of examples, if you can, about what's a payday lender. Who's a payday lender?
So like Like a
like a
payday
farm.
lender would be. Right, you'd be like borrowing basically. You would be basically taking out a loan for the amount of your paycheck or some amount close to that, and then you would, after you got paid, then on payday, you would go down and reimburse that lender. So these are usually relatively small amounts of loans for short-term needs, or let's say it's something happened and you don't have quite enough money, you're a few $100s short, and so you would go to them and get something with the idea being that you're going to repay that very quickly. Within just a matter of days. But the problem is the way the interest escalates so quickly that if you don't repay it almost immediately, it can get out of hand very,
What
very
are those
fast.
percentages of increase of interest that they put on it?
So it kind of depends on where you
Mhm.
are. I mean, it can get up into the hundreds of percent depending on the amount you borrow and where you borrow.
Wait a minute.
and how
Wait.
long.
Did you say hundreds of percent?
Well, depends on how long. So it's not going to be 100% a week, but it can be the equivalent of that over time if you borrow and are not able to maintain the payment. So you can end up, I guess what I'm trying to say is you can end up easily doubling the amount you borrow within a very short period of time, within a matter of only a few weeks. And you can double it again after that and continue like that.
That's crazy, right? So when we look at this and we're talking about how the Federal Reserve actually sanctioned this book, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of back up. What is the purpose of the Federal Reserve? What's their mission?
So the Federal Reserve, without getting into a whole big discussion about the Fed, which we could do its own thing about. So our work is primarily with the banking and financial system. So we have a responsibility for economic growth, stability of the banking system, making sure that banks are well run, that they're treating people fairly. We have the monetary policy responsibilities where they adjust interest rates to try and either stimulate or slow down the economy. We are involved in the payment system in a way so that if if somebody pays you for something, making sure the money moves smoothly from their bank account into your bank account. So one way to kind of think about it is our job is sort of monetary stability and financial stability, stability in the value of your money, and then stability with your actual money in terms of when you're dealing with banks.
So I know they have like a headquartered, but then they have locations,
right,
branches around
there's
the
12
country.
Federal Reserve banks. Yeah, there's 12 Federal Reserve banks. I work for the one here in Kansas City. And those are basically, you have the Board of Governors in Washington, and then those regional reserve banks, you can think about them as the operating arms of the Fed. Okay. So what we're doing is going out and my coworkers go out and examine banks in this area. And then they're also talking with people in the community. We want to understand what's going on with the economy, what's going on with the banking system, what are the new risks, what's employment look like, where do we see, let's say like energy and agriculture are real big in my part of the country, what's going on in those markets, and then factoring that into monetary policy.
So we have a Federal Reserve location here in Baltimore where I am.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that we used to have a couple of Black banks, and now the only one that I know of is Harbor Bank, right?
Right.
And so when we sit down and we look at across the nation, what is it that is happening that these Black banks are shutting down? What's going on in that from a national standpoint, where from a monetary standpoint, I don't even know what it is that's creating this flux where I know we're closing some businesses here. And, some of that changes because now those relationships aren't there. But what's happening in the economy to create an environment where a Black bank would have to close?
So a few things to sort of keep in mind or factor in here is we have seen the number of banks in the United States has been on an overall decline for some time. And primarily it's been small banks going away and larger banks continuing to grow in size and market share. Now, what we've seen within the Black banks is we have seen a more extreme decline. Now, there's a few reasons for that. One of them is that they're generally smaller community-based banks. So they're not as large, don't have the resources, don't do the lending necessarily on the scale of a larger bank. And then the other thing that we have seen, and since around 2007, 2008 was an example of this, is historically, and as others have observed, the Black community is hit harder in times of financial instability. And so if that's 2007, 2008, if that's during the pandemic, if that's the Great Depression, where they, before the Depression hit, the banks in Chicago, the Black banks in Chicago were seeing what was happening with their community. And so what happens is when a community is hit very hard, a bank can lend to a community and it can help that community flourish. But when that community is hurt, then that bank is going to hurt too, because it relies on that community. That's its customer base. And so as economic conditions, like I said, around 2007, 2008, when we had the foreclosures going on, a lot of people losing their homes, that was very damaging to many of these banks, particularly the smaller ones.
So because I don't understand, and I don't mind saying I don't understand. So the economy starts to shift, but people still have their job. There may not be as many, but they still have the job. They're still putting money in the bank, but all of a sudden they're shutting down. What is happening, Federal Reserve or nationally, or the economy, to get to the place where people don't have whatever it is for them to say, we're done?
Right. So another thing that's going on that I didn't talk about within the banking sector is how the banks and how regulations affect how banks can loan money.
Okay.
So earlier when you were talking about your experience and you talked about people who had a good education and they were of good character and they were very low credit risk, that's really how what we call community banks, these smaller banks, that's their business model. That's their strength. It's relationship lending. The way the regulatory environment is set up is it favors quantitative data, right? We want numbers. We want things we can quantify very easily. So big banks, they come in and it's almost a formulaic type situation. And if you fit within those metrics, then you can get a loan. And if you don't, you don't. And that's not how small banks operate. So it's a little tougher for them to do the type of lending they like to do. If you're a small community bank and someone comes and they're of that good character and they want to open a restaurant and there's not a good restaurant within 10 blocks of their house, you can figure out that that's a good credit risk. But how do you quantify that? And so banks need to be making money and making those types of loans within their communities to those types of individuals versus the sort of volume business that a large bank with a national footprint relies on.
But when you say that they need to be making money, they're making money off of the interest that you have on the loan. Or what are the other places that they're making money? How else are they making money?
So then fee money is obviously is a big one as well. So and remember, people should understand though, there's different banking models. So those bigger banks are going to be doing all sorts of other activities, and there's other types of investments and things that they do. When we're talking about a community bank, what we're talking about is a bank that takes the shared deposits, the financial resources of a community, and then becomes a catalyst for loaning that money back into the community. And then the community, the depositors earn some interest on that. The bank earns some interest. It's able to grow, allows it to be able to lend more money and continue to foster economic growth is the model, that sort of basic business model.
But if that's a basic business model, but the banks are closing, then what is the alternative in order for the bank to still be able to survive in an environment that's, it's like six in one hand, and then you're going to take it away from the other, right? How do we manage that versus going to a credit union?
Right. And so, well, one, we've seen some consolidation. So you have Liberty Bank out of New Orleans has acquired a number of Black banks. They recently acquired the one in Memphis. So you've seen some of these banks have begun to get larger. Another source of lending that you're seeing in some communities are what are known as CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. These are often funded through individuals or groups, and they are able to lend money very often in ways that banks cannot, because depending on how they're structured, their legal structure, they don't face those same sort of regulatory requirements depending on where you are in the country. They have been successful in many communities, but they're also very small. And so they're somewhat limited in what they can do, but they are becoming increasingly popular. And we've seen their numbers grow in recent years.
We used to have a place here called something, the Community Development Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been like when I first moved here, kind of, and they're now closed. But what I think was really interesting is that they would walk you through that process
Right.
before you even got the loan. They would walk you through and help you navigate what needed to be done. So there was more of a relationship.
Right.
And what's that? How do we formulate those relationships? Because that's also part of it, right? That's also part of it. How do we do that? How do we form that?
Right. And so that is, hugely important. And that's really where, the lender, if it's a banker or CDFI or some other type of group, really almost becomes your a partner in terms of helping you with a business plan, right? To help you sort of along this process and figure out what the opportunities are and how this is all going to work. And so it's that relationship is hugely important. One of the things people sometimes ask me, what can we do to fix all this, right? We have all these problems and I say, well, I'm a historian.
And it's multi-layered. Right. You got to peel it for real.
Right. You really do. And it's slow, but one of the things I think that the banking sector needs to think not only about diversity when it hires individuals, but it needs to think about the types of individuals and what motivates them. Mm-hmm. So, bring into banking people who are motivated by public service opportunities, instead of people, or in addition to, let's say, people who are motivated by that financial side of it. I think you can teach people the numbers, but if you have people whose heart and motivation is in public service, how do we help the community? And then you have them sitting in the bank, I think that can make a huge difference. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us, including myself and my peers at the Fed, to think about how do we bring those type of people into banking and sort of replace this. I sometimes joke that, when you say banker, people think of that little guy from Monopoly, like with the top hat.
Yeah, right, the little hat.
And real.
I
know. And I know from experience, there's a lot of community bankers that don't fit that mold, but the industry needs to think about how do we bring in these public service people and put them to work, and then everybody wins.
But then you want to talk. Then now we're talking about equity. So go ahead. That's a whole nother conversation, right? So we got to really deal with that. So one of the other things that really is of concern is we look at these locations in cities. There are a lot of urban communities that are changing. We did this big rush and it's beautiful. And then, we've been building the tall skyscrapers. But now what we're seeing is, people were doing this whole urban vibe all over the country, right? They were really loving it. But now they're leaving in great numbers from the cities into more county living opposed to the urban thing happening.
Right.
How do you function in an environment that has just said, we're tired, we're not going to do that anymore, and you now have to go into a place that you haven't seen that has as much melanin as many of the urban markets had?
Right. And so, and I've talked to people, they tell stories about, when they were growing up, there was a strong Black neighborhood, and maybe there was a Black bank, or maybe it's not part of the story, but, over time, those families have moved to other parts, and now they live in suburbs and whatever. And sort of that's been lost, and sort of how do you bring that back? And I think that's where it sort of gets back to making sure that we're bringing people, a broadly diverse employment base into banking to keep people engaged. I mean, one of the things that the research has found is that even when you go to high income, predominantly Black neighborhoods, there is still more likely to be one of those alternative financial services providers there. And there's been research that says even when people who have significant financial wherewithal, if one of those places is in their neighborhood, they're more likely to use it. And so it's sort of puzzling, why would that happen? And one of the researchers said, well, think of it, if you want to eat healthy and the grocery store is way over there, but the fast food place is right here on the corner, that's where I'm going to go, and that's where I'm going to build the relationship.
Mhm.
So I mean, all of this is I mean, it's hugely complicated, and there's a lot of layers to it. And I think we're trying to just kind of bring some of this up for discussion, and also make sure people understand that there is a rich history here of a number of people who are just phenomenal and inspiring individuals, and a lot of names people don't know, and that they should know. One of the things throughout the book and throughout the history is these bankers were very innovative individuals. These banks were well run. They were often far more stable than any of their banking peers during the periods when they were in business. They were doing things very explicitly to bring in that small depositor to help people learn, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, about why it's important to banking. And so that's what we're kind of hoping to spotlight with this history.
But it's also developing relationships, and that the bank leadership has to be committed to a socioeconomic strategy that's impacting the communities where they're located, even if it's on a peripheral. So if we look at the largest banking institution in each state, how does that impact, and what does it change in the neighborhoods where those branches are located? And what are those people who are the managers of those branches actually saying to the people who should be working there? And a lot of those people go into some of those branches, and those people do not have relationships with their own community.
Right.
They do not, let me keep big old NOT, not have a relationship. And so now we've got to go to this other lender that you're talking about that's going to charge us, 75 cents on a dollar.
Right.
So and when we look at this, we know that the Federal Reserve is about the money piece, but at some point there needs to be an authority in one of those lines that deals with this equity issue.
Right.
And I'm saying this because I did it firsthand, albeit 50 years ago, but it's still real in 2022.
Right. And there's rules and things that they have to follow, right? There's Community Reinvestment Act and some of those things. And in some places they work better than others. And there's
depends on your zip code.
It depends which institution you're dealing with. I mean, there've been some banks recently in the news for some of the activities that they have engaged in that have raised a lot of questions about what was going on. I mean, there's a lot there. The one thing I sort of think about is I think about just banks in general is encouraging people to think about where you're going to put your money to save. Because if you're putting your money into a bank to save, you are creating economic opportunity for somebody somewhere. And it might not be in your community. And so if you go back and look at, I think we talk about in the book in Detroit, where you were seeing people save, and you saw it in Chicago, even in the era we were talking about, where you had Black depositors putting money in white banks. And those banks weren't doing any business in the Black community. They were taking those deposits and they were lending it to the white community. And so,
and they still do in 2022. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And people need to think about that. And I think that's something people don't think about. The number one reason, even with everything you can do online, proximity is the number one reason you choose a bank. So if you go past that place on your commute home in the evening, that's probably where you may never go into it, but that's probably where you're going to put your money. And that continues to be the case no matter how much we do online. And so people really should think about that when they make deposits and where they put money and who they're doing business with. I think it's easy to overlook that if you're not familiar with how banking sort of works. I think you don't really think about that.
But what can we do as a community? What should our leadership, our state leadership, our city leadership, our county leadership, what should we be doing in terms of developing these relationships? Because in this, pull this book up again. I don't know if you all can see it. Wait a minute, let me move it over here. You need to go get the book, first of all. Just go get the book.
And it's free. It's free, by the way. You can go to kansascityfed.org and we'll send you one for free. You can order it on there. So.
Oh, wait, Kansas City free?
Kansas City Fed.org.
I love it. kansascityfed.org. I'm going to write that down. So, but when we look at this and we say, okay, what do we need to do nationally with our government, we got a governor, we got senators, we have all these people. In looking at if we've lost several of our Black banks, right? What do we need to do in order to make certain that bank stays there? It's a major institution right downtown. But,
Right.
We've lost some of our savings and loans that have been here. What should we be doing with our legislators? Because there are laws. I don't know how they impact. I don't know how they impact financial institutions as corporations and what they're doing and what their commitments are. And I don't know that there's any penalty. Are there penalties if you're not doing what you're supposed to do? If you're ignoring the people that
Sure.
you need to do? If you're not putting your banks in communities? I mean, it's just like a food desert, right? If you don't have
Right. It's a banking desert.
Right? How do
Yeah.
we deal with that? What do we need to do?
Well, I think it's, first of all, making sure people understand the issue, which is what we're trying to do. And I make very clear I don't have a lot of answers. I probably have more questions now than I did when I started
Yep.
this project. But I think it's raising the profile of the issue and helping people understand why this is so important. And I think sometimes as we think about issues of equality, I think for a lot of people, bank isn't going to be the first thing that comes to mind, right? I mean, there's obviously any number of important issues. We talked about the redlining maps earlier.
Mhm.
I mean, look at healthcare in those red line neighborhoods even today. Or, I mean, or how the public services in those communities even today. I mean, there's so many things that you can look at. But banks need to be right in the heart of this discussion, I think. And I think it's the type of thing that doesn't get into a lot of people's minds until you sort of open their eyes and they think, well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
If we did have a bank, then we could do this and this and this and this. And historically, banks were able to do this and this and this.
Mhm.
I do wonder, about the potential of online banking. I think there may be some opportunities there, but unfortunately, I guess I'm old fashioned. I'm a big believer in a brick and mortar building in
I
a
want to
community.
open the door. Right.
Right. I don't know. I think it's important because if you sit in that, like we talked about, be a part of that community. And if you sit in that community and you're like, we need a grocery store here, or we need a restaurant here, or we need a daycare here, or whatever it is, I think you can appreciate those needs more when you are right there versus on a phone or on a computer.
Mhm. In your research, and you've done a tremendous job, and I really want everybody to go get this book because it's really, I think it's something that your kids need to also read. In looking at that, what should we be doing when we're looking at Black banks being in Black neighborhoods? What about Black banks being downtown, or Black banks being part of the commerce area? Why are we relegated to go to a community bank versus to be where we normally would go to a downtown area?
Well, I think, because that's more often where the banks have been located, at least so far as they have located within those communities, because that's the customer base they're most likely to serve. And so they generally don't locate in some of those other areas you were talking about. Historically, they're in those areas. And then when they leave those areas, usually somebody else does not come back in there, which is when the failures become really tragic, because then nobody else steps in to help that community. And then so people are traveling to other areas of the city if they're going to be banked at all.
That's right. But what can we do? So is where banking institutions are, they're relegated, or not relegated, but monitored by the Federal Reserve and what other entity? Or is there another entity?
Right. So it depends on how the banks are chartered. There's different banking regulators. So the Federal Reserve has a role with national banks, bank holding companies, some state banks. There's state banking agencies that are involved in state banks. The OCC is engaged. That's the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. The FDIC is engaged. So all these regulators, depending on how the bank is structured, if it's a national bank or a state bank, and then sort of how they want to operate, if there's a holding company or not, is going to determine who their regulator is.
So as we sit down and look, and we got a couple of more minutes, we only have 6 more minutes left with you, and thank you so much because you've really indulged me and I appreciate
I've
it.
enjoyed this. I've enjoyed it.
So give me 3 things that my community should be doing to strengthen our Black bank that we have and some smaller savings and loans that we have,
Sure.
and talking to and having conversations with some of the larger chain banks that are here, and maybe even asking them for some sort of an assessment of
Right.
what they've been doing.
Right. So I think you want to encourage people to think about where you're putting your money,
Mm-hmm.
think about who you're borrowing your money from, making sure that you do have a bank account and that you're borrowing from a bank that you support, that your money is going to be loaned to things that you support within your community. And that includes if you go to a bigger bank that's maybe not located in close proximity. Maybe it is one of those major urban centers, the big bank downtown, and try to get a feel for what kinds of things, ask them what they're doing with your money, because you're giving them the fuel that can really cause this all to work, right? And yeah, you're going to get some interest back on that, a very small amount of interest currently, but you're creating opportunity, and that's the thing that I think about more than sort of the interest. Sort of what is that money going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what you really need to think about and have those discussions with your banker, and go in and talk to your banker if they're right there in your community. Great, and get to know them and start working. Take the initiative to build that relationship and go somewhere where you feel comfortable and where people understand what you need, and recognize, even if you can only save just a small amount, starting that relationship can be very important for if you get into some of these difficult situations that we all find ourselves in as we go through life.
So you said something, build a relationship. So from your perspective, I would love for you to give me 4 things that people should do to build a relationship.
Well, I think, go in and talk to your banker. So the banker may be out in the community, but I think, we sort of joke that, it's my parents' generation that went into the bank, and my generation doesn't go into the bank, and my kids, I don't even know if, they know where the bank is, but it's important to recognize that. And so to go in there and engage, and, if they're not welcoming to you and they're not engaging, then go somewhere else where you're treated fairly. And don't be afraid to do that, but understand that it is going to be most likely in the long term in your best interest, particularly as you need to borrow money to stay out of some of these places that are out there that are going to exploit you. That you can go into these alternative loan places and these title loan places, and they're going to be really nice to you, and they're going to make you feel really welcome. But you got to really think about in the long term how damaging that can be, and the risk you're exposing yourself and your family to.
Mm-hmm. And so when I think about this, we're really talking about walk in and go see that branch manager and have a conversation with the branch manager.
Right.
Because that's the first line, right? That's the first
Right.
line to be able to get to. And I know that we're coming up. Oh, we only have a couple minutes. Please tell us again, and I don't have my person here to help me today, but I'm going to put it in my newsletter and send it out. It's the Federal Reserve
Bank of Kansas City. And you go to our website, and there'll be a link there on the front page, and it'll take you to a place where you can order books. And there's a form there you fill out, and we'll get one in the mail to you right away. And if you like reading things online, you can download the file, and you can start reading right away also. And so all that's it's Federal Reserve research, so it's available free to the public.
You are amazing. A great moral and social force, a history of Black banks by Tim Todd, who is just delightful.
This has been great. I really appreciate our discussion this evening.
I loved our discussion. So if you ever get some more books, just give me a call. We can come and chat anytime.
All right.
Thank you, Timothy. We really appreciate you, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Timothy Todd, a great moral. Oh, you can't see it. A great moral and social. Marsha, do it like this. A great moral and social force the history of Black banks. And this is so powerful. The president and CEO, Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, says, as I have seen firsthand throughout my nearly 40 years career, community banks are a critical facilitator of local stability and opportunity, and their influence on a community's well-being extends well beyond the perimeters of financial considerations. Many of the banks within this volume exhibit these qualities to an exceptionally high degree. Applying their lessons in the face of modern challenges has the potential to pave a path for progress. Be sure to get in touch with the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City and order their book. Go online. This book, it's a lot of pages, 200 and something pages, is absolutely free. And if you don't want to wait for the book, I like to touch the pages. You can get it and download it online. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed our show. Thank you to Meredith and the WIM team and all the ladies who were able to join us today. And we're so excited. Thank you all so much. And we hope to see you soon. And let me just say a great thank you to my team of folks who were with us today. And that was Meredith Leon McCormick with World Bride Magazine. And we also have, where did she go? Luisa. She wasn't able to come with us today, but Luisa Diaz, we'll have to call her back another time. And Sonia Hudson Payne, as well as Maya Lopez. So we'll see you again next week. Hope you enjoyed our show. And I'm Marsha Jew signing off. Take care, and we'll see you next week.